Hello, and welcome to Solving for the Undefined podcast. I'm your host, Johanna, founder of Miss Kuiper's Classroom, the place that equips teachers and parents in helping students struggling with on-grade level math. But it's not always about the numbers, and that's why I'm here, bringing you the formulas to solve your problems, math and otherwise, and helping students gain confidence in academic abilities. And that's what you can count on. Hello, welcome to a brand new episode. I'm so glad to be back after a week off out of my control due to power issues. I'm so glad to be back. If you've been following me on Instagram, you might know the crazy events that have happened to me and my family past 2 weeks, I think. The story starts off with my husband walking out the door on his way to work and finding his car broken into for the third time in 2 months. Now this time, instead of stealing CDs, phone chargers, and a Snickers bar and a lemon Gatorade, they tore out the steering column, hot-wired the car, got the car probably 3 feet out of the parking space, and realized that the locked power steering was going to keep them from driving away. So my husband comes back inside, telling me all of this wonderful news and realizing he no longer can use that car, and then also realizing that he has no way to get to work, nor can he do his job. My husband works as a delivery driver for Domino's, well, used to work for Domino's as a delivery driver, where his car is quite literally his job. And they didn't have a need for him to be an inside person, like making the pizzas and whatnot. So he put in his 2 weeks and called it good. Now he's starting a new adventure, and we can talk about later. And then to top things off quite nicely, a couple days later, we had an ice storm here in Oregon. It froze to literally everything. Now you're probably thinking, oh, ice, freezing, duh. I might still have this on my Instagram. But there was an inch thick of ice on my vehicle, an inch thick on all of the trees, an inch thick on all of our power lines. That poses a problem because when the ice gets too heavy for trees or power lines, they tend to break. So on Friday evening, our power went out. Just like, shoom. And it takes you a second to realize what the heck just happened. But then you realize, oh, the power is out. And because it had been an ice storm, you may realize that the temperature was quite cold. Thank goodness for blankets and fuzzy socks. So we made it through Friday, hoping and praying that by the time we woke up Saturday morning, the power would be restored and we could warm ourselves up some tea and thaw out from the frozen night previous. When we woke up on Saturday, we still did not have power. And then Saturday evening came, still no power. But then a glimmer of hope. The power came back. The lights came on. And about 30 seconds later, after a joyous celebration, it went back out. And we sat there after our celebration of having power and heat for 30 seconds, being like, oh no, what do we do now? Just as we did Friday night, we put on the fuzzy socks and cuddled in some blankets and watched some previously downloaded Netflix on our phone and waited for the power to return. However, the power would not return until the following Thursday morning. Through all of the things that we had to deal with in that scenario, none of them were things that I could control. In insurance policies, they're called acts of God. Things that are outside of our control. Even though I could not control the situation that I was in, I could control my reaction. In my reaction, it's okay to feel sad, angry, upset, anything. It's okay to feel, but it's not okay to wallow in those feelings, keeping you from doing and reacting and living. If I had wallowed in my frustration and anger that our weekend and our week was ruined. I mean, come on, it was Valentine's Day weekend. I would not have been able to enjoy the fact that because my husband wasn't going to work, because the power went out and school was canceled, we got to spend an entire week together. That hasn't happened since Christmas break or our honeymoon. And with being able to spend time with my husband and our dog and our fur babies, we also got to spend Valentine's Day weekend plus a couple extra days in the Graduate Eugene. And while that might not ring a bell for you, that is the place where we were supposed to have our wedding before, COVID shut everything down. So we got to spend Sunday night, Valentine's Day, plus a couple extra days hunkering in, staying away from the cold, dark apartment at the place that we were supposed to have our wedding. We wouldn't have been able to do that if the power had not gone out and it forced us to find someplace else to stay, and our family members hadn't been so generous to help us out financially to find someplace that wasn't a cold, dark apartment. None of those things would have happened if, one, the power had stayed on, and two, if we had wallowed in our frustration and our anger, we would not have had a wonderful time in a special place for us. Now, you're probably thinking, gee, that's a great story. I'm glad you survived. What does that have to do with today's podcast episode? That is a great question. Thank you so much for asking. It has to do with, drumroll please, mindset. Mindset is everything. Literally, your brain controls everything your body does. So the brain and how you feel also affects everything that you do. In our school, ever since I started teaching at our middle school, growth mindset has been a huge push in all of our classrooms and in our advisory class, basically like a glorified homeroom. Growth mindset is, let me read you the definition, the belief that you can control your ability and can improve. So the opposite of growth mindset is a fixed mindset, where you believe that your ability is fixed, and however good or poor you are at a certain subject or activity is how good you will be forever. That's a fixed mindset. Whereas growth mindset, as I read the definition previously, is that you feel you can improve and continue to get better at anything you put your mind to. And if you've ever had the pleasure of meeting me in person or on Instagram, you know how much I love growth mindset, particularly the word yet. Yet in and of itself has so much possibility. When you say the word yet, it is telling your brain that even though you do not have the ability currently to do that, it is not something that's going to hinder you in the future. Like if I say, ooh, I'm not good at drawing yet, it's not blocking me off from the possibility of later in life becoming good at drawing. If you have the pleasure of meeting me in person or on Instagram, you know how much I love the word yet. I will literally yell it at TV shows when they're like, I can't do this. And I'll be like, yet! And then my husband will start laughing at me because I do this all the time. Especially, if they say something about, math is too hard, I can't do it. I'll yell yet and be like, how dare you limit your abilities like that? For me, growth mindset has the highest value. If you believe that anything is possible, you can do anything. And this has a huge impact on your classroom and how your students function within the classroom. If you have a limiting belief placed upon yourself or placed upon your students, say a student comes in and they are 2 levels below grade level, whether it's in reading or math or some other concept, if you believe that that's as good as they'll ever be, you're placing a limit on that student, and it's going to reflect when you talk to them, how you interact with them, and how you help them and give them advice when they're stuck on a problem. So how can you portray a growth mindset in the terms of yet? Giving your students the idea that anything is possible. When you're working with students and they are at a problem and they're like, I can't do this, say yet. And then my students always have to repeat it and say, I can't do this yet. They always say it begrudgingly, but as the year progresses, they typically, when I walk up when a student has a question and they're like, I can't do this, or I don't understand this. And then they look at me and I'm giving them the look, they're like, yet. I don't understand this yet. So even just me pushing the word yet at them, they're realizing that they need to say it. Even if they don't fully believe it yet, get it? If they don't believe it yet, it's being ingrained within them to say yet. And even just that simple act is rewiring their brain to think, oh, I can do this, or I can do this in the future. I just need to work at it, understand it, and be patient with it. Another way you can display growth mindset within your classroom is viewing failure as an opportunity to grow. Failure is not the opposite of success. I believe it was Thomas Jefferson, paraphrasing him a little bit, in creating the light bulb. He said, as he created the light bulb, I found 99 ways to not create a light bulb and one way to create a light bulb. So his failure was not opposite to success. He learned how not to create a light bulb and thus helped him create the light bulb. So to give an example within a classroom, recently we were doing a lesson on two-step equations within my Math 8 classroom. And I set it up in such a way that students would probably get one of two answers. So let's just say it was x plus a equals 10. And I realize that is a one-step equation, but bear with me. Most of my students, as we're talking about equations and inverse operations and solving for the variable x, a lot of them either got the answer 2 or 18. By both answers being put in chat, they all go privately to me. I can see that 50% of my students got 2 and the other 50% got 18. And that presents an opportunity for us to talk about what we call my favorite mistake. And I learned that from a coworker and I've been loving it ever since. But we get to talk about why 18 is not the correct answer. And we can analyze it and look into, does 18 plus 8 give us 10? No. So we need to go back and look, how did I get that answer? Oh, I probably did 8 plus 10, whereas the problem was saying something plus 8 gives me 10. With those students, we can talk about looking at that plus sign and realizing that in inverse operations, we need to subtract that 8 to create that 0 on that side and move the 8 to the other side, or the subtracting 8. Getting back up or learning why it's wrong actually gives us a better sense of understanding. Because now I know better than I did before that I need to be careful with my operations and do the opposite of what's happening to get a 0 pair to then figure out what the value of x is. Failure is an opportunity to grow. And we need to make sure that our students understand that it's okay to get things wrong, but it's not okay to not get back up and try. Because I don't know anyone who's gotten everything correct 100% of the time the first time they try something. If you do, feel free to message me on Instagram and be like, hey, I know this person, blah, 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 blah. I'll be like, oh, cool. I can look them up and see how they did it because I certainly don't know how. Moving on. Resilience and learning from our failures or our mistakes is how we can continue to grow as a person, as a participant within our community and our classroom, whether a student or a teacher or a parent. We need to be able to take our mistakes, move forward, learn from them, and grow. Another way that we can show growth mindset in our classroom is this. When we are talking with our students, we want to have a positive mindset. When a student gives a wrong answer, we need to be extremely careful in how we respond. We do not want to crush the student's willingness to speak, whether it's in front of a class or just with us. We don't want them to be afraid of getting something wrong. We want to encourage them to continue to answer even if they're unsure at first. When a student gets an answer wrong, we want to use a phrase like, not quite. We want to use this kind of phrase because it's okay that they got it wrong, but let's reconsider it. I say that phrase a lot. Let's reconsider this one right here. And that gives an opportunity for me and the student to have a conversation about why is this not right? Rather than saying outright like, that's wrong, let's try again. While trying again is a good idea, obviously. Saying like that's wrong, it tends to make students shut down. Especially if they are not students who have a super strong growth mindset. They're still growing in their growth mindset. Saying they're wrong can really squash that, and we don't want to. So framing things in a more positive manner is going to be extremely beneficial in the long run for that student, 1, answering, 2, their growth mindset, and 3, within the classroom. And lastly, another way you can show growth mindset in your classroom is what the book Teach Like a Champion calls positive framing. If you have this book, you can read through all 6 aspects of what positive framing is. I'll link the book in the show notes on my website, so if you're driving or something like, wait, what was that book? I got you. Don't worry. You can find it later. Positive framing is make corrections consistently and positively. Narrate the world you want your students to see, even while you are relentlessly improving it. I'm going to say that again. Make corrections consistently and positively. Narrate the world you want your students to see, even while you are relentlessly improving it. Okay, that seems like a really big statement. Let's break it down a little. So when you are in your classroom and you are starting an activity and you are seeing students who are working and you are seeing students who are not working, instead of saying, not everyone's there yet, I see some people not working. That normalizes the behavior of not working. We want to narrate the world we want to see. So saying, I've got almost everyone working is way different. I know it's only a few words less, but having that positive narration of what's happening is going to, in the long run, help you see the results you want to see. There is so much more to growth mindset and what you can do in your classroom to demonstrate growth mindset, to cultivate growth mindset, and to normalize growth mindset in your classroom. If you have other ideas or things that you do within your classroom, please send me a message on Instagram. You can find me at Miss Kuiper, and Kuiper is spelled Kuiper. Being like, hey, this is how I demonstrate growth mindset in my classroom. I would love to give you a shout out on a future podcast episode demonstrating how you use growth mindset within your classroom. So to wrap up what we've been talking about today with the power of mindset, things that you can use in your classroom to increase growth mindset, whether it's in yourself, in your students, or as a parent with your own students, is using the word yet to demonstrate the possibility of an ability growing or improving. 2, failure is an opportunity to grow. Failure is not the opposite of success. 3, reconsider how you approach a wrong answer. And 4, use positive framing within your classroom. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. To find all the links and resources to things talked about in this episode, head on over to MissKuipersClassroom.com and click on podcast. And until next time, I'll leave you with this. Growing up, I had a hen who would count her own eggs. She is what you would call a mathma chicken.